Christmas Eve at Whitmore Financial. The lobby glowed with 10,000 lights, but the conference room on the 32nd floor felt like a morgue. Darius Mitchell, a black American single dad in his 30s, sat across from a woman he had never met personally, watching her sign his termination papers with the efficiency of someone checking off a grocery list. His 7-year-old daughter, Amara, waited in the hallway, her face pressed against the glass, watching her father lose everything. He did not argue. He did not beg. He simply nodded, gathered the papers, and walked out with his spine straight and his heart shattered. Clare Ashworth, CEO of Whitmore Financial, believed she had just eliminated a liability. She had no idea she had just set fire to her own conscience. Darius collected his things from his desk on the 28th floor while holiday music played softly through the speakers. Silver garlands hung from the ceiling. A miniature Christmas tree sat on the reception desk, its lights blinking in cheerful ignorance of what was happening just 20 feet away. He moved methodically, placing framed photographs into a cardboard box. Amara's kindergarten graduation, their trip to the Grand Canyon last summer, a crayon drawing she had made of the two of them holding hands under a yellow sun with the words "Best Daddy" written in purple marker. His colleagues watched from their cubicles like spectators at an accident scene. Some whispered behind their hands, their voices carrying just far enough to sting. Others pretended to be absorbed in their screens, suddenly fascinated by spreadsheets they had ignored all day. Marcus, the junior analyst who sat 3 desks away, caught Darius's eye and quickly looked down at his keyboard. They had shared lunch dozens of times in the break room. They had talked about their kids, their mortgages, their dreams of retiring somewhere warm. Now Marcus studied the letters on his keyboard as if they might rearrange themselves into an excuse for his cowardice. Amara tugged at Darius's sleeve. Her voice was small but clear in the sudden quiet of the office. Henderson said there would be cookies shaped like snowmen. He knelt beside her, his knees cracking against the thin industrial carpet, his dark brown hands trembling slightly as he zipped up her pink winter coat, the one with the faux fur hood she had begged for at the mall last month. Sometimes, sweetheart, doing the right thing doesn't come with a reward. Sometimes it just means you get to keep looking at yourself in the mirror without feeling ashamed. She considered this with the gravity only a child can muster, her small forehead creasing in concentration. "Did you do the right thing, Daddy?" He pulled her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, memorizing this moment of innocence before the world had a chance to explain itself. "I tried, baby, I really tried." 3 floors above, Clare Ashworth stood at her floor-to-ceiling window, watching the city sparkle beneath a light December snow. Her reflection floated ghost-like against the glass, a woman of 42 with sharp cheekbones and sharper instincts. She had built Whitmore Financial from a regional investment firm with 12 employees into a national powerhouse, with offices in 7 cities through 15 years of calculated decisions and absolute dedication. Sentiment was not part of her vocabulary. Emotion was a luxury she had abandoned long ago. Somewhere between her father's bankruptcy and her first million, between her mother's funeral and her divorce, she saw them crossing the plaza below. 2 small figures moving through the falling snow. The man walked with his shoulders back, holding his daughter's hand. The little girl kept turning to look at the building, her face tilted upward as if trying to understand what had happened inside those glowing windows. Claire felt something twist in her chest, an unfamiliar sensation, something heavy and sharp-edged. She pushed it down immediately, reaching for the muscle memory of detachment. Business was business. The quarterly reports did not care about Christmas sentiment. The shareholders did not send cards asking about employee welfare. Darius Mitchell had been a risk, and she had eliminated him with the same precision she applied to any other threat to the company's stability. She turned away from the window and poured herself a scotch from the crystal decanter on her credenza. The ice clinked against glass, a clean and certain sound in the quiet office. She had made the right call. The evidence was clear and damning. Darius Mitchell had falsified risk assessments on the Henderson portfolio, exposing the company to potential losses in the tens of millions. His termination was not cruelty, it was surgery. You cut out the infected tissue to save the body. Any good leader understood this. Her phone buzzed on the mahogany desk, a text from the board chairman congratulating her on swift and decisive action. She typed back a professional acknowledgement and deleted the thread. Outside, the snow fell harder, covering the plaza in white, erasing the footprints of a man and his daughter. Somewhere in the city, a father was explaining to his child why Santa might need to adjust his list this year. Clare Ashworth finished her scotch and began reviewing next quarter's projections. The numbers made sense. The numbers always made sense. It was everything else that remained stubbornly illegible. The report that ended Darius Mitchell's career at Whitmore Financial was 17 pages long. It bore the official letterhead of the Internal Audit Department and the signature of Richard Thorne, Senior Vice President of Risk Management. Every paragraph was carefully constructed with the precision of a legal document. Every accusation was supported by documentation that appeared unimpeachable. Every piece of evidence pointed directly at Darius as the architect of a scheme to hide catastrophic risk exposure in the Henderson portfolio. What the report did not mention was that Richard Thorne had written every word of it to save himself. 6 months earlier, Richard had approved a series of aggressive investment strategies that violated company protocol. He had been chasing a performance bonus that would pay off his second divorce settlement and the house in the Hamptons his new girlfriend had been admiring in magazine spreads. The strategies worked brilliantly for 4 months, generating returns that made him look like a genius. Then they collapsed spectacularly in September. $47 million evaporated in a single week of market corrections and margin calls. Richard had 2 choices when the dust settled. He could confess to the board and watch his 18-year career implode in real time, his reputation destroyed, his future reduced to consulting work for companies too small to check references. Or he could find someone else to blame, someone without political connections, someone too busy with other obligations to notice the knife sliding between his shoulder blades. Darius Mitchell was perfect, a mid-level risk analyst with no allies in the executive suite, a black single father who left at 5:30 sharp every day to pick up his daughter from after-school care. A man who had actually flagged concerns about the Henderson portfolio in internal memos. Memos that Richard had dismissed as overcautious and then quietly deleted from the company's server when the losses materialized. The genius of Richard's plan was its simplicity and its audacity. He fabricated evidence showing that Darius had accessed the trading systems after hours, creating a pattern of suspicious activity. He backdated approval signatures to make it appear Darius had authorized trades he had never seen. He created a paper trail so convincing that even Darius himself might have believed it, if he had not known with absolute certainty that he had never done any of it. Darius had tried to defend himself in the days leading up to his termination. He had requested access to the original server logs. He had asked to speak directly with the board to present his own documentation. He had submitted his internal memos as evidence of his warnings about the very risks that had materialized. But Richard had been at Whitmore for 18 years. He played golf with 3 board members. He had hired Clare Ashworth's executive assistant. He knew which emails to copy and which meetings to mention in passing. Every door Darius knocked on remained firmly closed. The termination meeting on Christmas Eve was not a discussion. It was an execution dressed in corporate language. Clare Ashworth had reviewed the evidence personally, staying late the night before to read every page. She had seen the forged documents and believed them completely. She had looked at Darius Mitchell's personnel file, noted his ordinary performance reviews and his habit of leaving early, and concluded that she was looking at a desperate man who had gambled with company resources and lost everything. She never asked him for his side of the story. She never noticed that the timestamps on the evidence would have required Darius to be in the office on nights when his daughter's school records showed he was attending parent-teacher conferences. She never questioned why a man with no history of misconduct would suddenly commit fraud so clumsy it practically announced itself to anyone who looked closely. Richard Thorne watched the termination from his corner office 3 doors down from Clare's. He sipped champagne and smiled at his reflection in the window, watching the snowfall on a city that had no idea what he had done. The Henderson losses would be attributed to Darius's incompetence. The investigation would close. By spring, Richard would be in line for a seat on the executive committee. He had not simply survived, he had thrived. The only thing he had not counted on was the way guilt works. It does not announce itself with trumpets and thunder. It seeps in through cracks you did not know existed. It waits in the quiet moments before sleep, when the champagne wears off and the silence becomes heavy. And sometimes it takes the shape of a 7-year-old black girl pressing her face against glass, watching her father sign away his future. 3 weeks into January, Clare Ashworth found herself stranded on the shoulder of Interstate 91, 15 miles outside of Hartford. Her Mercedes had developed a mechanical problem that her engineering degree from Stanford had not prepared her to diagnose. The temperature was 12 degrees with a wind chill that made it feel like 5. Her phone showed 2% battery, enough for one short call or none at all. The nearest town was a smudge of lights in the distance, too far to walk in heels and a cashmere coat. She was considering her limited options when a pickup truck pulled over behind her, its hazard lights blinking in the darkness. The driver who stepped out wore a canvas work jacket and moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who fixed problems for a living, someone who worked with his hands and understood how things fit together. It took her a moment to recognize him without the context of the office. Without the suit and the employee badge, Darius Mitchell looked different in the cold January air, calmer somehow, despite everything that had happened, more centered. His deep brown skin contrasted with the pale snow as his breath clouded in front of him. He did not recognize her at first. The CEO of Whitmore Financial, bundled in a cashmere coat with her hair windblown and her makeup smudged by the cold, looked nothing like the woman in the corporate headshot. He simply saw someone in trouble on the side of a dark highway and stopped to help, the way his father had taught him, the way he tried to teach Amara. "Battery connection's loose," he said after a few minutes under her hood, his flashlight illuminating the engine compartment. His hands worked quickly, competently, tightening cables and checking fluid levels with the ease of long practice. "Should get you to a service station, but you'll want a mechanic to look at the alternator. It's showing some wear." Clare watched him work, unsure what to say, unsure if there was anything she could say. The absurdity of the situation pressed against her chest like a physical weight. She had ended this man's career 3 weeks ago, signed her name on the paper that took his livelihood, and now he was kneeling in the snow to fix her car without any idea who she was. A small voice piped up from the truck's passenger seat. Amara had rolled down the window, her breath making clouds in the frozen air. "Daddy helps everybody. He fixed Mrs. Patterson's fence last week, even though she never says thank you and always complains about our recycling bins. And he shoveled Mr. Kim's driveway twice because Mr. Kim has a bad back from the war. Daddy says helping people is just what you do when you can." Darius glanced at his daughter with a look of tender exasperation, the look of a parent who has lost this argument before. "Amara, window up. It's freezing out here. But I'm not cold." "Daddy, window up, please." The little girl complied, but not before adding, "He also makes really good pancakes. The ones with chocolate chips, in case you were wondering." Clare found herself smiling despite everything, despite the cold and the circumstance and the guilt that had been building for weeks. There was something disarming about the child's honesty, the unself-conscious way she cataloged her father's virtues, as if reading from a list she had been keeping. This was not the man described in Richard Thorne's report. That man was calculating, deceitful, willing to risk millions for personal gain. This man stopped to help strangers in the cold and made chocolate chip pancakes for his daughter. Darius closed the hood and wiped his hands on a rag from his pocket. "You should be good to go. There's a service station about 4 miles up on your right, place called Manny's. They're honest there. Won't charge you for work you don't need. Tell them Darius sent you. They'll take care of you." "Thank you," Clare said. The words felt inadequate, felt like nothing compared to what she owed him. But he was already walking back to his truck. She watched him drive away, the taillights disappearing into the winter darkness, and stood alone on the highway, feeling smaller than she had in years. That night, Claire pulled Darius Mitchell's file from her home office and read it again from beginning to end. This time, she read it differently. She noticed the community service citations from the company newsletter, the recommendation letters from previous employers praising his integrity, the notation that he had taken a 15% salary cut 3 years ago to care for his dying mother while still maintaining perfect attendance and positive reviews. She noticed how none of it matched the man Richard Thorne had described. She did not sleep well that night. The scotch did not help. The numbers in her head refused to add up. No matter how many times she ran through the evidence, the connection became clear on a Saturday afternoon in February. Claire was leaving a coffee shop in Hartford's West End, her mind already on the afternoon's conference calls, when she nearly walked directly into Darius and Amara on the sidewalk. Recognition flashed in his eyes immediately this time. There was no confusion, no moment of trying to place her face. His expression shifted from surprise to something harder, more guarded, a wall coming down. The warmth she had seen on the highway vanished like heat escaping through an open door. "Miss Ashworth." His voice was polite, but distant, the voice you use with door-to-door salesmen and ex-spouses you run into at the grocery store. "Mr. Mitchell, I didn't expect to run into you here." She heard herself speaking and hated how corporate she sounded, how automatic, how much like the woman who had signed those papers without asking a single question. Amara tugged at her father's hand, her face lighting up with recognition. "Daddy, that's the car lady, the one with the loose battery and the nice coat. Did you get it fixed?" "Daddy said you should get the alternator checked because they can be really expensive if they break all the way." Darius placed a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Amara, why don't you go pick out a cookie from the bakery next door? Get whatever kind you want. I'll be right there." The little girl bounced away with the enthusiasm only a promise of cookies can generate, leaving them in an awkward silence on the busy sidewalk. Pedestrians flowed around them like water around stones. Claire felt the weight of what she had done pressing against her lungs. "I owe you an apology for the car thing. I should have said more than just thank you. I should have said something." "You don't owe me anything." His tone made clear this was not false modesty or polite deflection. It was a wall carefully constructed and deliberately maintained. "I stopped to help because that's what people do when they see someone stranded in the cold. It had nothing to do with Whitmore or you or any of what happened. I would have done it for anyone." She should have let him walk away. That would have been the professional choice, the clean choice, the choice that made everything easier. Instead, she heard herself saying, "Let me buy you coffee or lunch, whatever you want. I'd like to help if there's anything I can do. Money for Amara's education, connections for job leads, anything." Darius's expression did not soften. If anything, it became more closed, more resolute. "Help, Miss Ashworth. You signed the paper that took my job 3 weeks before Christmas. You didn't ask a single question. You didn't look me in the eye during that meeting. You just ended my career like you were approving an expense report or signing a catering invoice." He paused, collecting himself, reining in the emotion that wanted to break through. "I don't need your guilt money. I don't need your charity or your connections. I've got a new job with a construction company in East Hartford, and it pays less than half what I made at Whitmore. But the people there actually talk to each other. They ask about your weekend. My daughter is healthy. We have a roof over our heads and food in the refrigerator. Whatever debt you think you owe me, consider it canceled." He turned and walked toward the bakery where Amara was pressing her face against the glass display case. Claire stood on the sidewalk, clutching her coffee cup, feeling something she had not felt in 20 years of climbing the corporate ladder. Helplessness. She had built an empire on the ability to solve problems, to write checks that made difficulties disappear. Now she faced a problem that money could not touch. A man's dignity was not for sale. His forgiveness was not available at any price. She watched through the bakery window as Darius knelt beside his daughter, helping her decide between a chocolate chip cookie and a frosted sugar cookie decorated like a snowman. Amara pointed at both, making her case with animated hand gestures. Darius laughed, a genuine sound, his whole face changing, becoming younger and lighter. He bought both cookies. Claire walked to her car and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. For the first time in 20 years, she did not know what to do next. Her phone showed 7 unread emails from the office, all marked urgent, but she could not bring herself to open any of them. The man she had fired on Christmas Eve had just taught her something about the limits of power. It was a lesson she was not sure she wanted to learn. March arrived with the stubborn chill that New England refuses to shake until late April. Clare Ashworth found herself at a community fundraiser for Hartford Children's Hospital, shaking hands and writing checks with the automatic grace of someone who had attended 1,000 such events. The ballroom of the Marriott buzzed with doctors, donors, and local politicians, all competing to be seen caring about sick children while enjoying the open bar. She was deep in conversation with a hospital administrator about the new oncology wing when a small figure appeared at her elbow. Amara Mitchell stood in a slightly too large dress with a pattern of tiny flowers, her hair pulled back in a lopsided ponytail that suggested her father's best attempt at formal styling. Her warm brown skin glowed under the ballroom lights as she looked up at Clare with the unblinking directness that only children possess. "I remember you," Amara said matter-of-factly. "You're the lady from the car on the highway and the coffee shop with the good cookies. You're the one who made my daddy sad." The hospital administrator excused herself with the speed of someone escaping a building fire. Clare found herself alone with the child in the middle of the crowded ballroom, surrounded by people who had no idea what was happening. Darius appeared behind his daughter, slightly out of breath, his face flushed with embarrassment. "I told you to wait by the dessert table. We talked about this." "But I saw her." "Daddy, I wanted to ask her something. You always say I should ask questions when I don't understand things." Darius placed his hands on Amara's shoulders, ready to guide her away before any more damage could be done. But the little girl was faster than his intentions. She looked up at Clare with an expression of genuine curiosity, no malice in it, just the simple desire to understand something that did not make sense to her 7-year-old brain. "Why did you fire my daddy? He didn't do anything wrong. He told me he didn't. And Daddy never lies. Not even about small things. He says lying is the worst thing because you have to remember all the lies forever, and eventually you forget one and then everyone knows anyway." She paused, her small face serious. "Did someone lie to you? Is that why you thought Daddy was bad when he wasn't?" The question hung in the air like smoke around them. The fundraiser continued, champagne glasses clinking, auction items being announced with theatrical enthusiasm, but for Clare, the room had gone silent. She looked at this child, this 7-year-old black girl in her crooked ponytail and borrowed dress, and saw something she had been running from for 3 months. The truth. "Amara," she said slowly, kneeling to meet the girl's eyes, ignoring the way her expensive dress touched the ballroom floor. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, big ones. Sometimes we believe things that aren't true because we don't ask enough questions, because we trust the wrong people, because we're in a hurry. And sometimes by the time we realize we were wrong, we don't know how to fix it. Amara nodded seriously, processing this information. "That's what happened to my friend Emma at school. She thought I took her eraser, but it was actually Michael. She was really mad at me for a whole day and wouldn't share her crayons during art time. But then Michael told the truth, and Emma said sorry, and now we're best friends again." She tilted her head, studying Clare. "Did you figure out who really took the eraser?" Clare felt something break inside her, not dramatically, not like glass shattering, but like ice on a river beginning to crack with the first warmth of spring. "I'm starting to," she said. "I'm starting to ask the right questions." Darius watched this exchange with an expression Clare could not read, something between protectiveness and curiosity. "We should go, sweetheart," he said gently. "The silent auction is ending soon, and you wanted to see if we won the art supplies basket." "Okay, Daddy." Amara waved at Clare with her free hand. "Bye, car lady. I hope you find out about the eraser." It made Emma feel a lot better when she knew the truth. Clare watched them disappear into the crowd of dressed-up donors. That night, she did not go home to her empty penthouse apartment. She drove directly to Whitmore Financial and used her master access to enter the building at 11 p.m. The security guard barely glanced up from his phone. The CEO had every right to be there at any hour. She spent 6 hours in the server room with a forensic IT specialist she trusted implicitly, a woman named Janet who had worked with her for 12 years and never asked unnecessary questions. By dawn, she had the beginning of something that looked very much like the truth. And the truth she was beginning to understand had teeth. The investigation took 3 weeks of late nights and careful documentation. Clare conducted it personally, telling no one on the board what she was doing. She reviewed server logs that Richard Thorne had failed to completely purge, finding traces of deleted files and backup systems he did not know existed. She interviewed IT staff who remembered unusual requests from the SVP's office in September, requests to backdate file modifications and delete email archives. She traced the timestamps on the falsified documents and found the inconsistencies that should have been obvious from the start. Darius Mitchell had been at his daughter's school play on one of the nights he had allegedly accessed the trading system. He had been at a pediatrician's appointment on another. The evidence against him was not just wrong. It had been manufactured with deliberate precision by someone who knew exactly what to include and what to exclude. Richard Thorne's name appeared on every suspicious file. His fingerprints were on every deleted email. His access credentials had been used to create the falsified records. The $47 million lost in the Henderson portfolio traced directly back to trading strategies he had personally approved, overriding warnings from multiple analysts, including Darius Mitchell. Clare confronted him on a Tuesday afternoon in his corner office with the view of downtown Hartford. She closed the door behind her and watched his face cycle through confusion, concern, and finally understanding. He was too experienced to panic visibly. Instead, he leaned back in his leather chair and smiled the smile of a man who had survived worse than this. Clare, whatever you think you found, I can explain. These server logs are notoriously unreliable. The IT department has been understaffed for years. Anyone with basic access could have manipulated the records. You're building a case on sand. The timestamps match school records. The access codes trace to your personal credentials. The deleted emails were recovered from backup servers. You didn't know existed because you never bothered to learn how our infrastructure actually works. She placed a folder on his desk. I have 17 separate pieces of evidence connecting you to the Henderson losses and to the fabrication of evidence against Darius Mitchell. Richard's smile flickered but held the practiced expression of a man who had bluffed his way through worse situations. You're making a serious accusation against a senior executive with 18 years of service, one that could damage the company's reputation far more than a quiet termination ever did. Think about the shareholders. Think about the stock price. Think about your own position. He leaned forward. I have friends on this board, Clare, old friends who remember when you were a junior analyst. If you push this, I will push back with everything I have, and I promise you it will get ugly. Clare had anticipated this moment. She had played it out in her head a dozen times, preparing for every threat he might make. Richard Thorne had spent his entire career accumulating power like a dragon hoarding gold. He believed this made him untouchable. He was about to discover otherwise. Richard, I grew up watching my father lose everything because he trusted the wrong people, because he believed their smiles and their promises. I swore I would never let that happen to me. But I also swore I would never become the kind of person who causes that kind of destruction. She picked up the folder. I'm not giving you a choice. I'm not negotiating. I'm informing you that the legal department has been notified. The board will receive this evidence within the hour, and federal regulators have been contacted regarding potential securities violations. The color drained from Richard's face. You're destroying yourself along with me. You signed off on Mitchell's termination. You're implicated in everything that happened. I signed off on a termination based on fraudulent evidence that you provided. That makes me a victim of your deception, not a co-conspirator. She paused at the door. Security will escort you from the building in 20 minutes. I suggest you use that time to call a lawyer. She walked out without looking back. Richard Thorne was arrested 2 days later at his home in Greenwich. The charges included securities fraud, falsification of business records, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. His bail was set at $2 million. The photographs of him in handcuffs appeared on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and led every business news broadcast for 3 days. Clare Ashworth called an emergency board meeting and presented the full scope of what had occurred. She spared nothing, including her own failure to investigate more thoroughly before terminating Darius Mitchell. She had trusted the wrong person. She had believed documents without questioning their origin. She had prioritized efficiency over justice. She offered her resignation if the board felt her judgment had been compromised. They declined unanimously. Several members later told her privately that her willingness to admit error had actually increased their confidence in her leadership. But Clare knew the board's approval was not enough. There was a debt that could not be paid with press releases or settlement checks. She had taken something from Darius Mitchell that no corporate gesture could restore. His reputation, his sense of security, his daughter's belief that the world was fair. She drafted a personal letter, then deleted it because the words felt hollow. She composed an email, then closed the window because it seemed cowardly. Finally, she drove to the construction site where Darius now worked and waited in her car for 3 hours until his shift ended at 6 o'clock. He emerged covered in dust, his work boots caked with mud, looking more at peace than she had ever seen him at Whitmore. "I came to apologize," she said when he approached her car. "A real apology, not the corporate kind, and to offer you your job back. Any position you want, any salary, full back pay with interest, complete restoration of benefits." Darius leaned against her car door, studying her face the way you might study a map to an unfamiliar destination. "Why now? What changed?" "Because I finally asked the right questions. Because a 7-year-old girl reminded me that lying is the worst thing. Because I found the truth about who really took the eraser and I couldn't pretend I hadn't." He was quiet for a long moment. Somewhere across the site, a forklift beeped its warning signal. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gravel lot. Workers called to each other in the distance. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "But you should know, if I come back, it won't be because I forgave you. Not yet. It'll be because my daughter deserves better than a father who can't move forward when someone offers him a chance." It was not absolution, but it was the beginning of something. Clare drove home as the sun set over Hartford, feeling for the first time in months that she might be able to live with the woman she saw in the mirror. The press conference was held on a Friday morning in Whitmore Financial's main auditorium. Clare Ashworth stood at the podium, flanked by members of the board and representatives from the Department of Justice. The room was packed with journalists, analysts, and employees who had heard rumors but wanted to see for themselves what was about to unfold. She spoke for 47 minutes without notes. She detailed Richard Thorne's fraud, the falsification of evidence, the wrongful termination of an innocent employee. She explained how the company had failed its own standards, how she personally had failed to exercise due diligence. She announced that Richard Thorne had been formally indicted on 11 federal charges and would face trial in the fall. Then she said Darius Mitchell's name. Mr. Mitchell was a dedicated employee who tried to do the right thing. He identified risks that others ignored. He raised concerns that were dismissed, and when those risks materialized into catastrophic losses, he was blamed for a disaster he had tried to prevent. Clare's voice remained steady, but her hands gripped the podium. "On behalf of Whitmore Financial, I offer Mr. Mitchell a complete and unreserved apology. We were wrong. I was wrong. And we are committed to making this right, not just with compensation, but with real, lasting change in how this company treats its people." The cameras flashed, the questions erupted. Through it all, Clare searched the room until she found Darius sitting in the back row with Amara on his lap. The little girl was watching with wide eyes, probably not understanding everything, but sensing that something important was happening to her father. After the conference, Darius approached the podium where Clare was still fielding questions from reporters. He waited patiently until she finished with the last journalist, then extended his hand. It was the first time they had touched since the night he fixed her car on the highway. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not for the job offer or the back pay. For telling the truth publicly in front of everyone. It matters more than you know. What will you do now?" Darius looked down at Amara, who was examining a microphone someone had left on the podium with intense curiosity. "I've decided to accept your offer, but not the same position. I want to head a new department. Whistleblower protection, employee advocacy, making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." Clare nodded without hesitation. "Consider it done. And one more thing." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know where this goes from here. Between us, I mean. I'm not ready to forget what happened, but I'm willing to believe people can change. I'm willing to give this a chance." It was more than she had hoped for. It was perhaps more than she deserved, but it was a beginning. Darius returned to Whitmore Financial on the first Monday of April. His new office was on the 31st floor, one level below the executive suite. The nameplate on his door read Director of Employee Advocacy, a position that had not existed 4 months earlier. He had argued for the title himself, rejecting anything with vice president or senior in it. He wanted employees to feel they could approach him without intimidation. He wanted to be accessible and approachable. The transition was not seamless. Some colleagues who had ignored him during the termination now sought him out with excessive friendliness, their guilt manifesting as performative warmth. Others avoided him entirely, uncomfortable with the reminder that they had done nothing when an innocent man was marched out of the building on Christmas Eve. Darius accepted both responses with equanimity. He had not returned for their approval. He had returned because his daughter deserved to see that justice was possible, that wrong could be made right, that the world was not as broken as it sometimes seemed. Clare found herself inventing reasons to visit the 31st floor, budget reviews that could have been handled by email, policy questions that her assistants could have answered, progress reports on initiatives that were proceeding exactly as planned. Each time she would pause at Darius's office and they would talk for a few minutes. About work, about Amara, about nothing in particular. The conversations grew longer. Amara, for her part, had decided that Clare was no longer the car lady or the sad lady, but simply Clare. She had invited Clare to her school art show and presented her with a watercolor painting of a very lopsided house. "It's your house," Amara explained. "I made it yellow because you seem like a yellow person. That means happy, but also a little scared sometimes." Clare had hung the painting in her office next to her degrees from Stanford and her photograph with the governor. The Thorne trial concluded in September with a guilty verdict on 9 of 11 charges. Richard received 12 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay full restitution for the Henderson losses. Clare watched the verdict on her office television with Darius beside her. Neither of them spoke as the judge pronounced sentence. There was no celebration, no vindication, just a quiet acknowledgement that something that had been wrong was now finally set right. Autumn arrived with the kind of crisp blue skies that make New England bearable. After the humidity of summer, Amara started second grade at the elementary school 3 blocks from their apartment. Darius coached her soccer team on Saturday mornings, running up and down the field in sneakers that had seen better days, celebrating every goal as if it were the winning point of a championship game. Clare discovered that she enjoyed standing on the sidelines with the other parents, cheering for goals and handing out orange slices at halftime. It was a version of herself she had never imagined. A woman in jeans and a team sweatshirt, learning to be still, learning that not everything needed to be optimized, learning that some moments were valuable precisely because they produced nothing except joy. The first time Darius kissed her, they were standing in his kitchen after Amara's birthday party. There were balloons everywhere, pink and purple ones floating against the ceiling. Cake crumbs covered the counter. The echo of a dozen 7-year-olds still rang in their ears, along with the sugar-fueled chaos only a children's party can produce. He kissed her gently, almost tentatively, as if asking permission even as he acted. She kissed him back with the certainty of someone who had spent months wondering if this moment would ever arrive. "I wasn't sure you'd want this," he said afterward, "given everything." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted. "But I've learned that being sure isn't the same as being right. Sometimes you just have to take the chance and see what happens." Amara appeared in the doorway, her face smeared with chocolate frosting. "Are you guys done being mushy?" because there's still cake and I want another piece. They laughed, the three of them, in that bright kitchen with the evening light coming through the windows. Outside, the leaves were turning shades of amber and crimson. Soon it would be winter again, another Christmas approaching. This time, Claire thought the lights would mean something different. This time, she would not be the woman signing papers in a cold conference room. She would be someone else entirely, someone she was still learning to become, a woman who had made terrible mistakes and chosen to make them right. A woman who had learned that power meant nothing without compassion. A woman who had found, in the most unlikely of places, something that looked very much like love. Darius took her hand. Amara finished her cake. And the world, imperfect and unpredictable, and occasionally cruel, continued to spin toward whatever came next.